Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in to the So Goes the Future podcast today. I have as my guest Miss Anita Scott. She and I recently reconnected. We attended the same undergraduate university,
Yeah.
uh, and one of our most beloved professors passed away, and that was an occasion for us to connect with each other. And she has an amazing story of serving young people in our country right now. And I would love to start off by just hearing a little bit about your own background. Like, how did you grow up, your
Mhm.
education, and how you got into serving in the education system here in the US?
Sure. Awesome. Well, first, thank you, Natalie, just for inviting me to be a part of this podcast to our working moms and our stay-at-home moms. I'm excited. So, as Natalie said, my name is Anita Scott, and I'm currently serving as an assistant principal at a middle school in Dallas. And it's my first year to serve as an assistant principal at a middle school. Previously, I served for 2 years at an elementary school as an assistant principal, and I come from a long line of educators. And it was my goal in life to run from the field of education. I never wanted to be in education. My mom, her grandparents, my uncle, my aunts, my cousins, my brothers and their spouses, their moms. So I was thinking, this is not for me. Like, I'm not just going to fall into what everybody thinks I'm going to do. And ironically, my parents homeschooled all 8 kids, K through 12. Eventually, it grew from us being in our living room to my dad going and get a building because my mom's friends would say, "Oh, will you homeschool our kids too?" And she was agreed and certified, and so she would just say yes. And then there were too many kids in the living room and too many kids in the kitchen, so he went and got a building. And so I started working at my mom's school at a very young age, which also helped me want to run from education because I started in it so young. And then I thought, I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to try something else. And God just kind of let me do my detour and He let me go every which way. But I was always around kids. I've always had a love for kids. I can never, ever deny that. And so I think it sparked when I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina back in 2011. And I homeschooled a 13-year-old autistic boy. He was fully functioning, very high functioning, but had just been removed from every school in his district because of behavior. And so I worked with him one on one for about 8 to 9 months. And when I left, he was accepted into the top private school in Charlotte. And that woke something up in me like, wow, I can work with someone who has been labeled this and this and this and this. And over the course of time, help them recognize, wow, I'm not those labels that they said I was. And just because it says so on my transcript or my behavior record, like I can be better. And so that sparked something in me. And literally, I moved back to Texas and I started in the ISDs.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump back just a little bit to our college experience and
Yeah.
honor Dr. David Naugle, who recently.
Yes.
Um, so you and I both were introduced to like philosophy and logic through him, and seeing, Christ in every aspect of
Yeah.
any work in our day-to-day lives. So I'm curious, like, how did he and that course affect your trajectory in life and change anything for you?
He absolutely changed the trajectory of where I thought I was going with my career. So, like you said, you and I both were, as we have coined, as students of DBU have coined this phrase, Nogalites. We both had Dr. Naugle, and I actually took his class my first year. I started at DBU in 2001, and I took his philosophy class in the fall of 2001. And at that time, a roommate dared me to take his class. And I said, I don't care about philosophy. I don't want to know about Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. And she said, I just dare you to take one class. And I literally, after that one class, I took a class of his every single semester. I think I made a C in every class. His classes were very hard to me, but I was hooked on his brain, and I was hooked on his articulation and his ability to articulate philosophy with the root of it being based in biblical foundation. And I'll give you an example of how he changed the trajectory of how I was thinking. The very first class, he asked the students, what does philosophy mean? And I didn't have a clue because I was just there to take the class. A lot of the students were raising their hands. And when he broke down philosophy to philo and Sophia, and philo meaning love and intimacy, and Sophia meaning grace and wisdom, and when he talked, or just wisdom, and when he talks about philosophy being the love of wisdom, and then he related it to the passage in Proverbs 4 that says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I was just blown away. I had never heard philosophy in that context. And then his very next question was, what is worship? And people started saying, what we do Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights or what we do in our small group. And then he went over to Matthew, where Jesus says, worship the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And he talks about how that is worship. And I remember him saying, so when you mow your lawn, you're worshiping the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. When you're wanting to get into an argument with your spouse or your child, how is that going to honor the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? And so I remember it sort of changed my mindset from what's my purpose in life and what's my will and what is the Father's direction for me. It just kind of went into, wow, whatever I choose, as long as I'm worshiping the Lord with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength, I'm going to give him glory in whatever I do. So I got hooked on learning and wanting to be a better Christian and wanting to serve the Lord better with all of my thinking and in my words and my behavior and my actions. And so Dr. Naugle and I started a prayer group with a lot of his students, and we did this on Monday night. And there was one Monday night, Natalie, we were in the middle of prayer, and Dr. Naugle looked at me and said, Anita, I think you have a calling in education and in politics, and I think you have a calling for your people. And I had no desire for education, had never, ever, ever thought about politics. And I remember thinking, he is so off. That was like, wow, no, he missed the mark on that one. And I remember I just nodded and said, okay, all right. And he was right. And that was in 2002, maybe. So here we go, almost 20 years from there, and I'm in education, and I have a desire for politics and policy making, and I have a desire to have a kingdom perspective in the area of as just America talks about racism and critical race theory and all those new topics and causes that have sort of just surfaced over the last few years. And I never want to have a bent toward, oh, I'm Black, so I'm supposed to think like that, or I'm Black, so I'm supposed to believe that. I always want to approach it with this. Like I always want to approach it from a kingdom biblical perspective. So that's how Dr. Naugle has sown into me.
Yes, he's left such a legacy through all of his students.
Yes.
I know he is present with us in his own way right now through the communion of saints, but
Yes.
I would love to know, share with us like what's it like growing up Black in America? Your experience might be different from others, but help the rest of us to kind of wrap our minds around the unique, struggles and experiences of our Black brothers and sisters growing up here.
Mm-hmm. So I love how you prefaced the question that my experience may be a little different. And I do think my experience is different in the sense of, so I grew up in Oak Cliff, so Dallas. I grew up in the rough parts of Oak Cliff. And like I said, my parents homeschool all 8 of us. So that means my parents started homeschooling in the 80s when it was unheard of. So we were often like teased and mocked and ridiculed, never in demeaning ways that affected our self-esteem, but it was just not what was happening at that time. And so we were already different in that way. My dad went to a Bible school in Dallas called Christ for the Nations Institute, and also in the heart of Oak Cliff, also strategically put in the heart of Oak Cliff because of their desire to serve. And so that meant he grew up with, I mean, not grew up, but he had a lot of Jewish influence in his biblical theology and a lot of Jewish narrative. And so when he started his own church, it had a lot of Jewish influence. And so we did not look like what would be considered the traditional Black church of having an organist and having a preacher who would yell and having a preacher who had a handkerchief and would wipe their brow when they were really in the middle of a good sermon. My dad did intend to emulate those actions. And so we were different in that way as well. We were also considered different, if you will, from what is, when I say different, I just mean what is projected onto TV and what's projected into rap music and what's projected into a lot of the stations that tend to promote this is what it looks like to be Black. We did not look like that. And so that's what I mean when I say different. And at the same time, my parents, I can give you a great example. When we had our homeschool in our home and in the building, our homework was to look at the news every night. And when we did our assignments and we had to report our assignments, our dad made us submit our assignments as if we were newscasters. So if I did a report on Jesse Owens, I would have to say, coming to you live, Jesse Owens, a remarkable man who made history by deciding to run in 4 different Olympic events in the time of the Nazi regime. And then my dad might say, pause, pause. I love how your voice is going up and down, but there were a few words where you did not enunciate at the end. Always use your ending sounds. So I would have to do it all over again. So we could not speak slang. We had to enunciate. We had to use our ending sounds. So we were often called white growing up. You guys are white. Your church is white. Your school is white. You all act white. You don't, I mean, your songs are white. I don't think that affected us in demeaning ways. We realized, man, we just don't look like what's in rap music. We just don't look like what's on TV. That was pre-social media, so we didn't have to compare ourselves to what's on social media. But we also didn't look like the neighbors. We grew up around Hispanics and Blacks. And so, I mean, we played basketball and we played hoops and, we could talk street when we were outside. But coming in, our brothers had to pull their pants up. They could not sag. Like that was just illegal in our home. They couldn't use the N word. It was not a joke. It was not a joke in our home to use the N word like a lot of guys do on a basketball court or what we hear in rap music. That was not acceptable. And so, again, that's what I mean when I say we looked very different from what's projected to be the stereotypical Black person, especially growing up in the neighborhood we grew up, where we did hear gunshots every night, where our electricity was turned off regularly, where our water was turned off regularly, where groceries, sometimes we were eating French fries and bread and ketchup for night after night after night after night. So we did not grow up affluent. We did not grow up wealthy. We do not have trust funds. And so I say all that because my parents were adamant about just because you live in Oak Cliff, you will not act like you are products of Oak Cliff. Just because we are growing up and we have all these situations that reflect poverty and reflect us being poor, you will always have options in life. You will never be able to not apply for a job because of the color of your skin. You will never not be allowed to go to that store because of the color of your skin. You will never not be allowed to drive in that neighborhood because of the color of your skin. So we didn't know barriers growing up. We didn't know to think like, oh, we can't go over there, or oh, it's too many of us Black people, we shouldn't go in that neighborhood. We didn't have that framework. And so we didn't grow up feeling inhibited because of the color of our skin. And I do want to point out again, it's because my dad did grow us up in this and not what the news said or not what TV told us. He made us watch Bill Cosby every Thursday because he wanted us to see a Black doctor and a Black lawyer. He made us watch A Different World because he wanted us to see kids going to college, and A Different World was a spinoff of Bill Cosby. And they made us watch PBS specials that honored Black people. It didn't take away the slavery. It didn't take away Jim Crow. It didn't take away civil rights. It wasn't like, oh, that never happened to us. That did happen to us. And you will always have options. You will always have options.
Your parents sound so thoughtful and like they were really staying grounded in Christ.
Yeah.
Um, and it's got to be hard, to be insulted by others, but it sounds as idyllic as it could have been, really. In a lot of like, I could see how you would become an educator with parents like that. So do you feel like other people other people growing up Black in the US might be growing up with a bombardment of messages about limitations as opposed to
Hmm.
what you grew up with, or are you seeing this with the students that you've worked with in your years of education?
Yes, I see that as a huge bombardment. And to be honest, Natalie, one of my constant prayers is that my growing up and not having as many inhibitions doesn't, I don't want my childhood to never allow me to empathize with someone else's childhood that is different from mine. So I don't want to come off as, so I don't know why people are struggling, or I don't get why they think that way, or I don't get why they think that way, or this group or this group. I never want to be so far removed from not understanding, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so I say that because one of the things I'll tell someone as an assistant principal, we are often like interviewing and hiring teachers and teacher aides and staff. And so when I'm speaking to an individual, a potential candidate, I will tell them we work in a community that feels very underserved. And we work in a community that feels very impoverished and underprivileged. And I said, so that means if that's the mindset of this community, then the narrative that they believe is to demand in lieu of asking. And there is a sense of entitlement in lieu of gratitude. And so I will tell the candidate that means when they're advocating for their child, it may not always sound like advocacy. It may sound like rude. It may sound aggressive. It may sound assertive. But when you live in an underserved community, and when you feel underprivileged, or when you feel like the other group or other culture is always ahead of you, then you have to believe, you have to demand. You don't even know to think the opposite side of, I wonder if I approach this person like this, if I'll get a different result. The only way you've been raised may be demand, yell, scream, sometimes curse. And so I'll ask the candidates, how do you deal with that? And how do you help me help them believe that they too have options? And they are not a statistic. They are not one more percent sign. That we can help them learn how to navigate advocacy in a way where we're on the same team and we're not against one another.
I love it. So, how can the rest of us who are, in the people groups that are considered privileged,
Mhm.
how can we support, Black moms, Black families, children growing up here in the U.S. Who are having that experience, and it's painful and it's a struggle to believe that they can have more. Is there anything that the rest of us can do as friends and community members?
I think that's a great question. Great questions. I do think it's important. I know a lot of the narrative that came out last year when the racial unrest was like at a climax, and there were a lot of healthy podcasts and YouTube videos and sermons that would encourage non-black people to like listen to the stories of those who feel oppressed or those who are oppressed. Like listen, get to know them, befriend them. And I remember thinking those are awesome. Like, what could be better than caring? What could be better than just listening, right? I also believe what those narratives that came out last year with listening and caring and empathizing. And I think another component of it is to, if I'm coming from a biblical perspective, is also to invite those who feel oppressed and are oppressed to step into an arena of entertaining forgiveness, and to step into a place of, how do I forgive when that person offended me, that non-Black person just offended me? How do I forgive and let go? How do I forgive and not think, okay, see, I tried it and it's not working, so I got to go back to demanding and back to being assertive and aggressive? How do I live out of a place of, I want my children to have better, so I need to make better decisions? Because if I've grown up this way and I'm struggling and it's hard and I feel oppressed and I feel underprivileged, I don't want my child to feel that way. So there are some different decisions that I have to make. And I say that because my parents were born in the 40s and watched, my parents were both born a year and two after World War II. And so they watched America change. They watched civil rights come to a high peak. They were born when the ending of lynching was, or when lynching was coming to, some closure. But they saw, my parents can speak very candidly about, no Negroes in this door, Negroes in the back, and no Blacks through this door. And my parents speak candidly about Black water fountains, white water fountains, Black swimming pools, white swimming pools. But they also recognized that they felt oppressed and underprivileged. And so they wanted to make some different decisions for their own children. And so I think it's about, if we want to see something different, we have to do something different. And that doesn't take away listening and caring and empathizing. It just adds another component of the kingdom that says, how do we move and entertain and embrace this idea of forgiveness?
I have a couple of anecdotes I want to throw in.
Yeah.
Find that. Thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine what it would have been like to grow up that way, and it's really impressive that your parents were so conscious to
Mm-hmm.
have a different experience and hope for your future.
Yeah.
So when I grew up in Pleasant Grove, I'm not sure if you're too familiar with it, but it was
Very.
like equal parts white, Hispanic, and Black at the time. So, I had friends all across the board. And as we started getting closer to puberty, like fourth and fifth grade, I started seeing a change in my peers. I didn't particularly feel like I needed to click off with my white peers, but I
Mm-hmm.
started seeing the Hispanic and the Black students clicking off. And I remember I was always a very sensitive child. It was very hurtful to me because they had been my friends all these years. And I suddenly felt like there was a wall that had been placed between us. And I know that I hadn't done it, but I mean, of course, children, we're immature in general. And so you can't really fault us for our behaviors at that age. But
Yeah.
I look back and I think, I also remember like there were a few Black girls and they were like, well, you can hang out with us if you want to be in our gang. And they started talking about starting a gang.
Mm.
And I look back now and I'm like, I'm sure that they were just getting older and able to assimilate the attitudes and the stories that they might be getting from other adults in their lives, whether it's parents or older siblings or cousins or whatever. And that's what I think was happening. So I love that you say, the parents, we have so much power to influence the way our children see themselves and see
Mm-hmm.
others. Because that was a very painful time for me to
Mm-hmm.
feel like I was separated from the friends I'd had for years. Um, and then so I'm a single mom and I worked with a dating coach in recent years because it's like, why do my relationships keep not working? And
Ah.
so a lot of what we worked on was forgiving everyone and all the things. and changing the story that we tell ourselves about our worth and what's
Wow.
possible for us. And that has been such powerful work for me.
Wow.
And it's really bringing myself more in alignment with the truth, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd never seen it that way. I was living in the examples and the stories I'd seen growing up, and I was unconsciously kind of creating those in my other relationships.
Mm,
And I feel like that has so much similarity to what you're saying, like this doing the hard work to shift the story, to get yourself into the light of what is actually true about your worth as a
mm,
human being, as a child of God, what's possible for you, and living like that is true.
yeah.
And it's hard to forgive sometimes, but
Yeah.
um, there are ways we can connect as humans to having compassion on the
Yeah.
weaknesses and even evil tendencies that other people have had, once we're able to be safe and away from.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Came up for me while you were talking.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are powerful. Those are powerful. It honestly, Natalie, it makes me think of a story, um, in the sense of, I just loved how you said it helped you forgiving, and your dating coach saying forgive anyone, forgive everyone, and it helped change the narrative, and it helped change from, oh, I had been telling myself this, and but this is the truth. And I think about how, particularly last year, I had a lot of my Black friends like text me and call me, and Facebook message me and say, these injustices feel so wrong, like again and again and again, and this is just hard to do. It's hard to like let go. And in my heart, I would think that's so true. Like that's painful, especially with the invention of social media and cell phones that can record. Now the injustices are like in our face. And so I would think, yeah, like this is painful, this is painful, this is painful, right? And then I think about like Jesus on the cross, and how he didn't have his eyes looking for the balcony of like Pontius Pilate or another government official to say, hey, Jesus, you were right. We were wrong. We let Barabbas go. That was our mistake. You never did anything wrong. You're awesome. Please, we're going to get you down from that cross. Jesus didn't have his eyes set on that. He had his eyes set on the Father, who said, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. And so Jesus forgave even before we repented. Like Jesus forgave even before someone said, I messed up, I'm sorry. He extended forgiveness. And so I have to keep that at the same time as I think about like the pain that may happen to any people group, right? And so I always reconcile and put those together. And so I love what you shared about your dating coach saying, forgive, forgive. And that's what Jesus wanted to model for us, is that we don't have permission to withhold forgiveness, waiting on someone to apologize. He modeled for us first. No, first forgive, and people may or may not apologize, but now we're free because we have forgiven.
and of course, we're called to correct wrongs and fight for
Yes.
justice. But when we don't forgive, we kind of hold ourselves back. When, like with the dating example, not forgiving certain people from your past, an ex,
Yeah.
a dad, whatever, a lot of times that anger and that hurt would come out in a relationship, and you would sabotage that relationship and
Yeah.
unjustly harm others,
Yeah.
because you were trapped, in this narrative of having been wronged and not feeling like it's been resolved.
Yeah.
um, okay, where to take this? There's so many things to talk about with you. I am curious to hear about where are you getting involved politically, or where do you see yourself going, and how do you hope to help heal the
Yeah.
racial wounds in our
Yeah.
country and make a better world for the next generation?
Well said. Well said. Yes, make a better world for the next generation. Um, I am so at the beginning stages of knowing where I want to go politically. Except I do know that I want to get into policy making. I have a desire to move into curriculum writing at some point, curriculum specialist, because I feel like that's a great bridge. Or I say I feel like that. I have a business mentor who is now a friend of mine. I have a family member who I reached out to say, hey, if I eventually want to move into policy making, where do I need to make a shift in my academic career to eventually go over that bridge? And I've had 4 or 5 voices say curriculum specialist, curriculum instruction. And I think that's great because it helps me at, at one point have a concerted effort to influence a school building. Like, here's a great curriculum. Here's how to help teach your students with this textbook and this textbook. And then with helping to write such a curriculum, then I can just start to segue into writing policies for whatever arena I feel like the Lord would call me to in the political arena. I know I want to serve like at the state level, and then we'll just see if it's the Lord's desire to have me eventually ever serve at the federal level. But it's definitely to move into curriculum and then policy making.
I think that's great. I did want to mention to the viewers and listeners that even though you don't have your own family that you've started, you have actually taken steps to be a foster parent
Mm.
at certain times. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about your experience around that, how you got into it?
Yeah, sure. So my first foster child was, I don't know if he would be actually labeled a foster child. I taught him in 8th grade, and then he came to live with me when he was in 11th grade. And CPS asked, hey, can he stay with you? And it was the CPS caseworkers at a hospital. He had been abused by a family member so severely that he was hospitalized. And so I'm at the hospital with my brother, and the CPS caseworker said, we can't send him back home. And we asked him, where could he go? And he mentioned you. So he stayed with me for 3 months. And that triggered something in my heart toward teenagers. Like I said earlier, I've always loved kids. But it was something about teenagers who, like you said, Natalie, when you started to see at this adolescent stage, like your friends starting to make some decisions that changed the trajectory of your friendship and your relationship, that's often what happens with teenagers. They start to believe, well, since I'm turning 12, I better act like this now. And since I'm turning 13, I better act like this. And that's why I love teenagers, because they are being embedded with some, sometimes truth and sometimes propaganda. And so I said yes to have him come live with me. And he lived with me for 3 months until CPS found a home with him. And that was in 2015. And then in 2019, I started my training to become a foster parent. And it took me about a year to do the training, maybe even a year and a half. And so I had my first foster daughter. She came with me. She came to live with me last August, and then she moved back to her home in November. And so my home is a foster home. And so now CPS knows Anita wants teenagers, and teenagers are the largest population in the foster care system, because a lot of people's hearts are turned toward infants and babies and, children who don't talk back and, teenagers test the water. And so I cannot bear children of my own because I had a hysterectomy. And so I am out of the childbearing arena. Fortunately, God put the desire for adoption in my heart when I was in elementary school. And I didn't know anybody in my age group when I was in elementary school who was adopted. I don't even know if I ever knew if anybody was adopted. If they were, I didn't know. But clearly that was an idea from the Holy Spirit to, when I'm an adult, one day I want to adopt. And so he must have known that I would have a hysterectomy and I would not be able to bear children. And so I just want to encourage the moms. I would often tell myself, I will foster and adopt when I'm married. And then I was in my 30s having that idea, and I was in my 40s having that idea, and now I'm 42. And so when I started the foster process in 2019, I believe I was 40. And so I thought, I can't wait till I'm married. Like, I'm already 40. I'm just going to do this. I had well-meaning friends and family like, are you sure you want to do this? You're single and you want teenagers? Are you crazy? And I just thought, I can't wait. I can't wait till I'm married. I want to do it now. And then, in 2020, when COVID was at its height, well-meaning people, are you sure you want to do it with COVID? Like, and I thought, I bet they need it now more than ever because of COVID. So I just felt the bravery of the Holy Spirit saying, go, go, run and do it.
I love it. Um, oh gosh, I had so many thoughts. Let's see. So I think it's beautiful how God gives us each different strengths. I have also worked with kids of all ages. I love children. I love being a mom. Um,
Yeah,
but I gravitate towards teens. And I think it's because, I remember being a teen, I can see what a period of influence they are in. They are trying to find themselves and they
yeah,
don't always have the skills, especially in the modern age where they're just bombarded with all these different messages and images and
yeah,
celebrities and things. They don't always have the skills to navigate wisely through the messages and the storylines and which one is
yes,
right and where they want to
yes.
go and who they're going to be. And there's so much potential for them to make really devastating decisions in their life,
Mm.
but also really amazing shifts to get them
Mm-hmm.
trajectory to what they're ultimately, desiring. So I teach theology at a Catholic high school. I've been at it for about 5 years, and I love being in a place
Mm.
to do my best to give them truth, to give them a true narrative, so they can be all that they're made to be and have a happy life. And I see you are doing the exact same thing in the secular arena where it's probably needed even more.
Yeah.
And I would love to, well, first of all, mention to our moms who are watching, if you feel at all that a strength and a calling that God has for you is to take in children who are in foster care or to adopt, like, please, take it to prayer, because that's
Yeah.
another way to truly make a difference in this world by
Mm.
loving kids who've been through hard things and don't have
Mm-hmm.
families. So I'd like to wrap up, I think, with, in general, you see a lot of what the youth of America are facing, regardless of race or anything. And so, what are some things you see that kids are facing that you could give us moms some tips and guidance so that we can do our best job to set them up, to
Yeah.
be healthy and holy moving forward?
Yeah. I love that. Thanks for asking that question. Such a healthy, whole question. I can give I think about some of the actions and decisions I made when I had my foster daughter. I got her when she was 15 and she turned 16 while she was with me in that 3 month span. And when she came to me, we were unpacking her luggage and I'll just say that right there. Um, foster care children and non-foster care children will often show you their luggage, but they may not show you their baggage. That's unpacked at different times in their life when you're like, whoa, I didn't know you were struggling with that. And wow, where did that come from? And you just said that out loud very aggressively and very assertively. There's a wound in your heart. Let's deal with that. And so we unpacked her luggage, but I knew over time we would unpack her baggage. And so what I learned was that it's what in the book of Job, God gives and he takes away. And so I would often I think one tip for moms is when you're going to take something from a child, give a child something. For example, my foster daughter came in with a lot of books on suicide. And that's trending right now in the teen world. Suicide is very romanticized in TV shows, in movies, and music. And so suicide is very beautiful right now to our teens. And that's very sad and painful to think that it's so highlighted right now and underscored. Depression is real, but it's very romanticized for teens. And so there's a lot of music and lyrics that just sort of emphasize if you're not depressed, something is wrong with you. Like if you're not feeling oppressed, something is wrong with you. When we know the truth is, the opposite. And depression is very real, but again, it's made to be very romanticized. And so she had a lot of books and material that made suicide and depression romantic. And so I let her keep that for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then we sat down and we talked about it, but I didn't take it from her until we replaced it. So then we went to Half Price Books and the library and Barnes and Noble, and she could choose other books that were healthy. And so it wasn't like, you can't have those books in my house and you can't have that in my house. And I don't want you reading that. It was more like, we will replace it. And then when we replace it, let's put it away. And you don't even have to touch that. And that made her say yes. And there were some TV shows that she was loving before she came to me. But those TV shows, there were some moms who were like always fighting and always cursing. And she just found it very entertaining. And at the time I was working from home and her school hadn't started yet. And I remember I would be in my office and I would just hear from the TV, bleep, 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 bleep. And she was just chuckling and laughing. And I thought, that's not, I know it's normal, but it's not right. And she loved dance. And a lot of these TV shows were about dance. So I just went on Facebook and said, hey, who can help me find some TV shows that just emphasize great dancing? Not mediocre, but dancing at its height and its full potential, because she wants to be a dancer. So I got a lot of feedback. And so I could sit down and tell her, here are some options that you have. And so now she was willing to let those other unhealthy things go. So I just want to encourage moms, just before we take away, let's be ready to give them something in return.
And something that's helping to bring them closer to truth and put them
Yes.
into,
Yes.
get them out of the limiting beliefs and into the possibilities and
Yes.
the Holy Spirit.
Yes. 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 And that doesn't mean she always said, great, thank you for helping me, I'm a better person. Like, it wasn't like that. She would often be like, but I've been reading that series for so long, or I've been watching this since I was a kid. And it was conversation after conversation after conversation. So I don't want these moms to think like she just was like, thank you, you saved my life.
Right.
It wasn't like that. We had, again, conversation after conversation. She would roll her eyes, she would walk away, she would smack her lips. But I wanted her, I have to make a different decision for her so that she can make a different decision for herself, right? I'm the adult, she's the child. And so I would often tell her, we're not roommates. There's one adult in the house and there's one child in the house. And I am the adult. And so I'm supposed to make adult decisions for your safety, whether you can see that or not,
Yes. And after teaching teens for the last 5 years, they are in a place of brain development where they are pretty self-focused, and there's good things about it. There's a reason why it happens, but
yes,
it is hard when you're the adult or you're the teacher, because they don't stop to think, thank you, that is so helpful. You just changed the trajectory of my life.
right.
So you have to kind of, build yourself up a little bit when you're,
Yeah.
you're working with teens, but there are those moments. There's those moments where they will be vulnerable and they will tune into that and they'll let you know. And it's so beautiful. I'm sure you've experienced it in education.
Yeah.
So
Yes. It can be very rewarding, but like you said, it's where we build ourselves up. We encourage ourselves because they won't always say thank you, but we know why we're doing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like this particular conversation should be concluded with some prayer personally.
Oh, love
That's
it.
what I'm feeling. Um,
Yeah.
I'd love to offer you the opportunity if you feel like you would like to say a prayer for us to conclude and for all the moms and
Absolutely.
people working with the youth of America or any.
Yeah. I would love that. Yes. I'm so glad you asked. Yes.
Okay, well, take it away.
Yes. Well, Lord, Natalie and I are just so grateful because you saw this happening before we even did, God. You saw us reconnecting before we even did. And we just want to honor you and say thank you that you've given us both a heart for the kingdom, a heart to bring you glory and honor. We want to say thank you for letting our paths cross with Dr. Naugle. And we just want to say thank you, God, for how you have coordinated our hearts to want to give to children and give to moms, single moms or moms who have spouses, God. We want to be a blessing and honor this generation so the next generation is honored. We want to do our part and leave a legacy. We want to do our part and enrich the lives of those who are in front of us so that the lives after us are enriched, God. And we want to do it well. And so we just pray over the listeners. We pray over those who have a heart to say, yes, that's me. How can I be a blessing to my children? How can I be a blessing to foster children? How can I be a blessing if I feel like I'm supposed to adopt, but I'm nervous and I'm scared? And I say, welcome to the club. And I just say, I'm just reminded of Paul in Philippians when he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And when we are strengthened, it doesn't mean we don't have fears or inhibitions or panic or anxiety. It just means we just keep moving forward though with the next step. So we do ask that you would help us as educators move forward with the next step, and as moms move forward with the next step, and as foster moms and adopted moms move forward with the next step, so that we can honor you, Jesus. And we know if we honor you, we are honoring one another. So, God, we love you and we bless you. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, well, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. And Anita, if anyone wants to reach out to you with any questions or opportunities or anything,
Yeah.
is there a way you'd be comfortable with people?
Absolutely. When you said something earlier, and I thought, man, I wish I could leave like my contact information so people can like ask me questions about anything. My first name is Anita, Anita. My last name is Scott. So I have an email address, Anita Scott 1945 at gmail.com.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Natalie.